An educated lady, known to be of impeccable character, is sitting at her computer. She pauses for a brief second, looking outside at the night sky, and then writes, "With a gun in the street. $12,000 is fine. Just do it ASAP." Whoever's on the other side of that message writes, "For $4,000 we'll throw acid in her face, and for $50,000 we'll torture her to death." The woman shakes her head. "No, just kill her." That's based on a true story, and the person this woman was talking about could have been you. Today you'll hear about hitmen, drug traffickers, killers, even cannibals, who've all at some point been caught up in the darkest part of the internet. You'll hear why this is not a place you should go to, and we'll give you many reasons why. First of all, you should know where you're going when you visit the dark web. In short, it's hidden within something called the deep web. The deep web is just the part of the internet not accessible by your standard search engines, and that makes up most of the net. The dark web accounts for only about 0.01% of the deep web. To get there, you'll have to download certain software on your computer, such as the Tor browser. This should give you anonymity, although as you'll see today, it's not always the case. Tor was invented by the US government to create anonymous communications, and today you'll find journalists and activists using it, as more open communication could find them in a spot of trouble. WikiLeaks, for instance, is part of the dark web, although it publishes on the open web. With this in mind, it's not illegal to download some software and start using the dark web. It's what you do with all that anonymity that counts, which is what you're going to hear about in this rather dark show today. Let's also remember that you might just be a curious sort of person who just wants to have a look around the dark web. But by doing this, there's always the chance that you might walk down the wrong virtual alleyway and find yourself in a place you wish you'd never gone. You might also be a marked man after this, or worse. Before we talk about the really creepy stuff on the dark web, we should first talk about drugs, the illegal kind. Some of you might have met a person who told you they ordered the purest drugs they've ever had on the dark web, and it was delivered to their door without a problem. Wow, how convenient. But listen on before you put your order in for a sheet of colorful acid tabs and 24 ecstasy pills that look like little Lego bricks. You can indeed do this, and many people have, with one former big fan of the dark web drug business calling the place Amazon run by the cartels. He explained that just about any illegal drug you could think of was there on offer, including precursors. You fans of Breaking Bad will know that these are the substances you need to make certain drugs, such as crystal meth. And believe it or not, the sites selling the drugs are often pretty reliable since there is a place to give feedback to the seller. So you might find a comment that says Grade A Coke and delivered on time, top seller. A few years back, there was a seller with the name of Jesus of Rave. On his site, he stated, in a quite professional way, "Working with UK distributors, importers, and producers to source quality, we run a tight ship and aim to get your order out the same or next day. This tight ship also refers to our attitude to you and your privacy. We've been doing this for a long time." It seems that ordering drugs on the dark web in Britain really took off a few years ago. There are also lots of recent news reports stating that seizures of ecstasy and amphetamines in the post has increased dramatically, with the drugs mostly coming from the Netherlands after being ordered on the dark web. The Guardian wrote this in 2019. Criminal organizations in the Netherlands are major producers and exporters of synthetic drugs, exported via sea containers or trucks. But there is said to have been a growth in online purchases in which the postal services are exploited. The US, Australia, and New Zealand are the main recipients outside of Europe. The same article said that a sting operation led police to a massive 300 kilograms of drugs and 51 firearms. That same year, a dark web website called the Wall Street Market (WSM) was shut down in Germany and arrests were made. The owners were making big bucks selling heroin, cocaine, weed, and speed, as well as malicious software, counterfeit documents, and stolen data. It worked in 6 languages: English, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish. At the time, prosecutors wrote, WSM operated like a conventional e-commerce website, such as eBay or Amazon. However, its sole existence was geared to the trafficking of contraband. As you probably know, the money to be made selling drugs is just so good that arresting dealers or traffickers is like playing a game of whack-a-mole. You put one in prison and another pops up. The war on drugs has been nothing but a failure for the most part, with the authorities looking like Sisyphus, the guy who was told he had to push a round rock up a hill for all eternity. This means 2 things. One thing is that you can be assured that despite these arrests, you can still go on the dark web right now and order pretty much any drug you want. But it also means that you can be assured that some men with badges will be trying to put you in prison for it. This is why it's dangerous. You might think you can get away with it seeing as you have anonymity, but you actually don't. The FBI and other law enforcement entities are all over the dark web. This is the problem with the dark web. You can get eaten by spiders. When people think they have impunity, they can get careless. That's what happened recently when 150 people were arrested in an operation called Dark Hunter. Law enforcement from Europe, the US, and Australia were involved, and about $25 million worth of drugs were taken. In this case, no small-time buyers were arrested, just the sellers, but cops warned about something else. Many of the drugs these days contain the killer substance fentanyl. This stuff works well in hospitals for pain relief and might sound good to a hardcore opiate addict, but the truth is there have been a startling number of news reports, including ones involving famous people, of folks thinking they're taking a drug like cocaine and dying because the white powder also had fentanyl in it. As we write this, 5 people died all at once of an accidental overdose in the US when they didn't know that their powder contained the drug. But doing a quick search, we could have chosen numerous stories that included the words accidental fentanyl overdose. We don't condone drug use here, but if a person is intent on taking drugs, then the safest thing would be to know what you are taking. When you order from the dark web, you really don't know what you're getting, and since everything is anonymous, the seller might not care too much about what they're giving you. Even if you die, there is very little chance that they'll ever be arrested. We found a story containing the words fentanyl-laced ecstasy tablets. Rave to the grave might be the suitable expression here. Unfortunately, while it could save tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of lives, the authorities for the most part have always been dead set against providing folks with easily available drug testing equipment. On top of this, sometimes the buyers do get arrested. There was a story in 2020 that stated 179 people were arrested in a massive bust involving multiple drugs and guns, and some of those arrested were buyers. Most were in the US, others in the UK, Germany, and Sweden, the Netherlands, and Austria. At the time, the authorities claimed that the golden age of the dark web marketplace is over, but they've been claiming to be winning the war on drugs since people watched black and white television. Nonetheless, Europol had a warning for prospective buyers and sellers saying the hidden internet is no longer hidden, and your anonymous activity is not anonymous. Law enforcement is committed to tracking down criminals no matter where they operate, be it on the streets or behind a computer screen. They've even been arresting small-time dealers, as can be seen in one story involving a Florida man. Using the name Da Candy Man, his line of work was mostly the distribution of cocaine. He would send the stuff right to your house via the mail, and guess what? Once he was arrested, the cops also knew where he'd been sending the stuff. We'll add one more thing here. Some people on the dark web might be pretending to sell drugs, but all they're after is your personal information. They're looking to exploit that information, and as you'll soon see, sometimes they can blackmail you. Mostly, though, they're phishing in order to get their hands on your money. You can buy phishing kits on the dark web, but you can also be phished. Okay, so maybe drugs aren't your thing. Maybe you're not really into anything illegal, but you do have a very curious mind. When someone told you they had a video of a man being cut up with a chainsaw, you just had to watch it. Freak. Unfortunately, gore sites are all over the open internet, and while it's technically not illegal to post videos of such things as someone being stoned to death, beheaded, or perhaps eating a great big dish of steaming poop, sometimes what you see will forever scar that mind of yours. Unless, of course, you are either desensitized to that kind of thing, or a bit on the weird side. That makes up a lot of society, actually, seeing as just one site back in the day called Best Gore was getting in the region of 10 to 20 million hits a month. The owner of Best Gore was eventually arrested after posting the video called One Lunatic, One Ice Pick, which consisted of an eternally unstable maniac named Luca Magnotta dismembering a guy, then sending some of the body parts to schools and political offices. Obviously, that was a very serious crime, and Magnotta is now in prison where he belongs. If you know the story, you'll know that before he was arrested, animal activists were also hot on his tail because some of the videos consisted of him doing very bad things to kittens. So maybe one day you get on the dark web and end up seeing something you wish you hadn't. Although we guess right now some of you are thinking that infographic show writers are just big wusses. Maybe gore is nothing to you. According to the Washington Post, much of the worst gore talked about that is supposedly available on the dark web is just that, talk. You might have heard that you can watch a movie that stars a person being murdered, aka a snuff movie, but they may not actually exist. Some of them are set up and no one dies. Or the rumors about certain films are just rumors. Still, videos of accidental deaths or executions do exist, and it's not illegal for you to watch them. As one writer pointed out, it's illegal to murder somebody, it's illegal to watch somebody get murdered and not report it, but it's not illegal to watch an online snuff film, at least not at the moment. You wouldn't, for instance, have been in trouble if you watched a video that surfaced on the web made by the so-called Dnipropetrovsk maniacs. These two Ukrainian teenagers brutally murdered 21 people in 2007, and they filmed a lot of the violence. For a time, you might have been able to see some of that on gore sites, but not anymore. Still, as we speak, people are going to the dark web to watch similar stuff. One journalist went there to check out such gore, later writing that there is a danger in becoming desensitized to it. He said in an article, "I could make you physically sick in minutes by showing you the stuff now, but the second or third or fourth time you see it, you get desensitized to it all. It happens to a lot of people." It creates a lack of empathy in people, and the more you watch, the worse it gets. We don't need to tell you that this isn't good for your mental well-being, but this guy said people get addicted to it. He added, "I don't know what drives people to it, it's just pure evil. Why does someone want to watch that? The uncomfortable truth is there's a lot of evil out there." Then you could be down one of those bloody rabbit holes and really see something you wish you hadn't. In the content of a sexual nature that is very much illegal, your curiosity could possibly take you there. In 2019, BBC reported that 337 people were arrested in 38 countries because they were involved in such content. Of the users, the police said they are not as cloaked as they think they are. They're not as safe as they think they are. You never know if you're being watched when you're on the dark web. There was a recent case of a guy in the US that talked on a web forum in the dark web about killing his wife. He asked other people for advice on how he might do it. He wrote, "I aim to ensure my wife's death within 18 months, ideally long after our divorce is finalized, about 6 to 8 months from now. This is the only way I can begin a new life with full custody of my child." After some discussion, he came up with poison, which he said might be put in her coffee, wiped on a door handle, or just slipped on her feet while she was asleep. He then tried to buy what the authorities call a chemical weapon. They later explained to the media that it was a colorless, volatile, flammable, and highly toxic liquid that can be easily absorbed through the skin and might produce life-threatening systemic effects with only a single drop. The man bought the chemicals too, paying $95 for a 10-milliliter vial. The problem is the seller was none other than the FBI. Agents arrested him after he went to the place and asked for it to be mailed. Once in custody, he admitted to the murder plot and said he'd been thinking about using the dark web to hire a hitman, but he told agents that hiring a hitman would be as expensive as getting the divorce. Hiring a hitman on the dark web could also get you in trouble. Not too long back, you could have visited a so-called hitman for hire website on the dark web and found one that stated, "If you want to kill someone, we are the right guys. We have professional hitmen available throughout the entire USA, Canada, and Europe, and you can hire a contract killer easily." One guy was told that he could have his wife killed for $6,000 and the death would look like an accident. A bunch of such sites were around back then, with names such as Sicilian Hitman, Drangheta Hitman, Camorra Hitman, Bratva Mafia, and Yakuza Mafia. They were all actually owned by the same person. One site claimed, "We offer a large international network of experienced hitmen and provide services to beat up, set fire, or kill customers' targets. We assign hitmen in the same country as the target with the appropriate skills that match the job specifications." The thing was, the guy behind the sites never intended to kill anyone. He just took the money and at times talked to the FBI. There have been instances where someone went on the dark web trying to hire a hitman, and after the payment was made, the person got arrested. This happened not long ago with a British doctor, and it later happened to a woman in Denmark for hiring someone to whack her former boyfriend. In a very recent case, including a 51-year-old woman in Florida who'd gone to the dark web and tried to hire a hitman to murder the new wife of her ex-boyfriend. She paid $12,000 in Bitcoin and a further $350 for the gun, and all that information was seen by the FBI. The agency also saw her first message, which read, "I'm looking for a quick hit in Southern Florida. Is anyone available?" This was a woman with a master's degree who had her own financial consulting business and regularly attended church. She was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. The website was just another scam, although it looked real enough. It stated that the prices were $5,000 for death by shooting, $20,000 for death by sniper, and just $2,000 for a good old beating. In another recent case involving a man in Italy, he paid 10,000 euros or $11,855 in Bitcoin for men to go visit his girlfriend and beat her to death. European police got wind of this, although the news stories didn't exactly state how. In 2020, a woman in Michigan was also hoodwinked by such a website that she believed had 18,000 operatives working worldwide. She gave the site $5,000 to knock off her husband. It turns out that the site was run by a man in the US who never killed anyone but pretended to be a hitman as a way to catch potential criminals. This is a murky area, since such websites might entice folks to want someone killed. The owner of the site told the media that since he'd started it up, he talked to about 400 people who were looking to have someone killed, and a few people who wanted to sign up as hitmen. The guy said about 10% of the people he chatted with had legitimate requests, and that's when he informed the cops. The point we're making is when you're on the dark web, you never quite know with whom you're getting involved. We're sure some of you would think it'd be funny to talk to a hitman and pretend you wanted someone killed, but even that could get you in trouble. Still, the owner of the aforementioned site said he always waited a day to ask the person if they still wanted the job done. If they did, he then got on the phone with law enforcement. Talking about one of his first cases, he told the media, "I get an email from a woman saying she needed 3 people murdered. A few hours later, she sent a second email with the names and addresses of the people she wanted killed. The woman was a British Canadian who said the people she wanted dead had stolen the inheritance she should have received from her father. The website owner added she wanted to get even. She was going to stop at nothing. I reached out to a friend who was a sergeant and said, "I think this lady is serious. Can we request a welfare check?" The friend notified Canadian authorities. She was eventually sent to prison for a few months for soliciting to commit murder. The website owner was proud, saying he helped save the lives of 3 people, although you have to question if this woman would have had those killed or in the end just killed them herself. The web is full of these stories. One website claimed that it wouldn't just kill people but would torture them to death, although that would set the client back a whopping 50 grand. Painless poisoning was 42 grand. An acid attack, 4 grand, and crippling was $10,000. Not only are these sites scams, but even if a person doesn't get reported to the police, how will they ask for their money back? They don't even know who they've been talking to, and there's no way they can go to the cops about their missing money. These days, the newest hitman websites on the dark web tell people that there are all kinds of hitman scams out there, but they are the real deal. One site declared, "We can provide video proof of our services with timestamps." Again, such proof is not possible for fake services. Sometimes they'll go to great lengths to look real too, with one website going as far as hiring some dude to set a car on fire and film it just to show the potential client that he meant business. It was later found out that the guy who'd set the car on fire was a man in California who'd contacted the website and said he somehow wanted to get involved with the hitman business. The website in this case was called the Bessa Mafia. It was later talked about in the media after it was discovered that after a man had paid $6,000 to have his wife killed and it never happened, he then killed her himself. There is no shortage of spiders and crazy people on the dark web, which in general is why you ought to give it a wide berth. We can only find one instance where it's been proven that hitmen were hired on the dark web and actually went through with the murder. That was a case in Russia where 2 teenage boys killed a drug trafficker for a rival drug trafficker. In short, if you go to the dark web and try to hire someone to do something nasty for you, you'll likely just lose a lot of money and then end up in prison. Not long ago, you might have also met a British man named Matthew Falder, a person you could call the embodiment of evil. Using the name 666 Devil and Evil-Mind, this guy went on dark web forums and talked about all manner of disgusting things, usually involving young people. His thing was to lure people online into thinking he liked them, and then as time went on, he'd ask them to make very compromising videos of themselves. Since he was well-spoken and seemed sincere, people fell for it. Falder was very educated, holding a position as a geophysicist researcher at Birmingham University. Once he had his hands on the images or videos, he said that if the victims didn't pay him a whack of cash, he'd send the content to everyone they knew. In one message, he told a young victim that he would send the images to everyone on Facebook associated with your school and in letters to your parents and teachers, explaining with printouts of all the pictures that you will strip for money. Most of the victims were naive, and it wasn't that hard for a highly educated maniac to manipulate them. In some cases, he told them to film themselves licking toilet seats and eating dog food, after which he posted the content to his many fans on the dark web. He wrote in one post to those fans, "Glad you're all enjoying her suffering," and later, "I love blackmail, especially forcing someone met online to do things they don't want to for amusement." Imagine visiting websites where people like that post things. Imagine virtually befriending this person and not knowing what you were getting into. Another example of blackmail involved a man who wrote on Reddit that not long ago he tried to buy drugs on the dark web and had given an address only for him to receive a letter instead of the drugs. The letter stated, "Congrats, you bleep. You've been participating in illegal activities and we have our eye on you." The man didn't send any cash and the scammer was at best amateurish, but this is just another example of how when you go on the dark web, you're potentially making yourself vulnerable. One other thing some people go on the dark web to do is just pretend to be something they're not, as that in itself can be kind of exciting. These people sometimes roleplay very dark fantasies. This can also get you in trouble, never mind blackmailed if you meet the wrong person. You might have heard of the case of a New York City police officer who got the name the Cannibal Cop. His real name was Gilberto Valle. A few years ago, he was sentenced to a prison term for going on a website called Dark Fetish Net and talking about how he wanted to kill and eat women, including his own wife, the woman who eventually found those disturbing messages on his computer. He didn't just talk about it either, but he had a list of around 100 women whose names and addresses he had thanks to his job as a cop. One of his messages about his wife said that he wanted to let her bleed out, then butcher her while she hangs. It was a big case at the time because this guy really didn't seem like a killer at all. In court, he said his conversations on the forum were all about role-playing and he never intended for anyone to get hurt. He said in court as time went on, more and more people wanted to do these role plays with me because I was really good. I kind of wanted to provide and be a little more graphic and not disappoint. Again, the competitive side of me came out. Valley wasn't using the dark web. This stuff was actually out in the open, but make no mistake, there are more people like him on the dark web, a lot more. He was eventually cleared and released from prison, but his case begs the question, just how much can you just talk about crimes online without falling foul of the law? Can you roleplay online or just mess about and get in trouble? We're guessing that some of our viewers would try this with friends just for fun, maybe to see who replied, and to understand the depravity of certain people online. You should probably give that a miss. In 2018, a man in the US went on the dark web and found a forum where he left this post. I'd like to try cannibalism and see how it feels to take a life. If you'd be willing to let me kill you, and are in the US, preferably in the South, and can travel by car, contact me. His name was Alexander Nathan Barter, and at the time he was just 21 years old. First of all, yet again we're showing you what kind of people you might meet on the dark web. But secondly, even if you yourself posted this kind of content as a kind of joke, you should know that not long after, Barter posted a message that was read by an officer working for the Texas Department of Public Safety. That agent replied saying he was willing to give his daughter to Barter for the express purposes, namely for killing and eating. Several other emails were exchanged in which Barter told the agent to meet him and bring a spare set of clothes and a burner phone. In another email he stated, "I really want to do this." Barter was arrested on the day the murder was supposed to happen, and on him at his house was a knife and some plastic bags. But was this just part of a dark, twisted fantasy, or would he have really done it? The jury thought so, and a judge sentenced him to 40 years in prison. In court, the prosecution said, "As this chilling case demonstrates, online talk is not always just talk. The constant vigilance of our law enforcement partners has prevented an evildoer from finding a like-minded accomplice and bringing his grisly plan to fruition." A site that no longer exists on the open web was called the Cannibal Cafe. When it was still up, you could have read posts with titles such as "I really fantasize about being butchered, roasted, and eaten." Then in 2001, a computer specialist in Germany named Armin Meiwes killed the man he found on that forum. His victim was Bernd Jürgen Armando Brandes. Both men were in their 40s when they agreed to go through with it. The two men met, and let's just say what happened was one of the strangest dates in history. And in the end, bits of Brandes ended up in Meiwes' freezer, and the cannibalistic fetishes he'd had since he was a child became a reality. He also ended up in prison. Meiwes told the court that for many years he'd only fantasized about doing such things, but it was when he found a real-life cannibalism website that things moved from fantasy to possibility. He added, "If I hadn't been so stupid as to keep looking on the internet, I would have taken my secret to the grave." As we said, his interactions with his victim happened on the open web, but that was back in the day. These days, if you want to talk shop about eating people, you'd struggle to do that out in the open virtual space. As we showed you with the Texan guy, the dark web is the place to go for that kind of thing these days. You might find a forum with someone saying something like this. Real dark web comment. "I need someone to eat my fresh meat. I am juicy and tender." But we are guessing most of these people are just messing around for the sake of being a bit naughty. Still, now you know that law enforcement could be reading such messages, and we don't recommend risking playing around. As another example, one guy we found said he did a bit of messing around on the dark web. He later said on a forum, "I was trying to make a small explosive for a dumb little movie I was going to make with my friends. I found myself in the dark corners of the internet." One site in particular had a text document downloaded talking about how to sneak explosives past metal detectors. NSA is probably all over me right now. He could be right. There might not be any red rooms on the dark web or hitmen who will torture your ex to death or ghastly human experiments with homeless people, but there are certainly sexual deviants and torture fans only too happy to share content with you. There might be the odd person who wants to chat about eating human eyeballs with you. There's a long list of folks who want to sell you guns, drugs, and someone's personal data. Those people might also be law enforcement or blackmailers. Unless you're depraved, desperately drug-addicted, downright evil, or a dedicated journalist or activist in hiding, then why would you go there? The real reason you shouldn't visit the dark web is there's just no point. And if you aren't any of the things we just mentioned, there really is no reason at all. Pandora's box, as full of snakes as it is best left locked. Even if you do manage to get yourself flagged by law enforcement or scammed by a heartless fiend, you'll have to wade through a lot of junk to get there. Now you'll need to watch this fascinating story we just mentioned, why dark web hitman turned on his own. Or have a look at this.